All right, good morning from Studio 18. Today we're going to focus on Rule 5, playing the round. So the definition of a round is just 18 or fewer holes played in the order set by committee.
Okay, so that brings us into practicing on the golf course. And again, remember that our efforts here for these rules are to try to talk about the stroke play portion, not match play, because in match play, there's certainly a difference on practicing on the golf course prior to your match. But in stroke play, you're not allowed to go out on the golf course and practice prior to your round. When can you practice? Unless the committee has a local rule in place that does not allow you to practice on the golf course during a round. If I finish hole 1 and I want to, once I finish the hole's completed, if I want to putt another putt on that hole, make another stroke, I can do that. Or if I want to chip, I can't go to a bunker, but if I want to make a short chip on that previous hole, I can do that as well, as long as I'm not holding up play. But for all purposes, most tournaments, especially in all the ones we run on our hard card, we have a local rule on our hard card that says you cannot practice during the round. So that is prohibited. So make sure you understand what's on the hard card. And I would say for about all big tournaments, that local rule would be in place. So I would highly recommend that you check into that before you make a practice stroke. And then as far as practicing after the round is over, according to the rules of golf, you can do that. Again, we do not allow it. There's also not a local rule, again, like I told you back in the official guide, that you can put in place, which is I-1, that does not allow it. But I think the reason it's in there without this local rule is, so if I'm playing in a club championship and I finish in the morning, I want to go back out that afternoon and play 9 holes with my wife or something like that, or just go out on the golf course and practice. I think it was written with that intent, but for tournaments such as ours, we do not allow that. Why don't we allow it? Because a lot of times the golf course is getting prepped for the next day. They may even cut some of them late in the evening. They already do hole locations for the next day, or we may go out to make some changes. So we do not allow any practice on the golf course after your round is over, in between rounds during a tournament.
All right, so now I will start talking about 5.3, starting and ending a round. So when to start a round. So a player's round starts when the player makes a stroke to start his or first hole. So a player must start at and not before his or her starting time. So for our events, if we have a tee time start, we ask you to be there 10 minutes prior to your tee time. And we tell all of our starters that you're to start exactly on the start time. So we will not start you before. We will only start you after your start time if there's a delay, if the group ahead of you ran into some trouble on the hole, then we will have to start your group a little bit later. But with a time that is set by the committee, it's treated as an exact time. So if it's 9 o'clock, it is 9 o'clock. It's not any time before 9:01. So you must be there prior to your start time, and you must be ready to make your first shot right at your start time. So you must be there at 9 o'clock, not 1 second after 9 o'clock. So there are exceptions with these 3 cases. So if you're not there, you are disqualified except for these 3 exceptions. So if a player arrives at the starting point, ready to play, no more than 5 minutes late. So if you arrive 4 minutes late and you're able to make your first shot, you are able to play that round. However, you do get the general penalty, and that is applied to your first hole. So if you make a par in the first hole and it's a par 4, you will be getting a 6 because you were there late. You weren't on time. So exception 2, so the player starts no more than 5 minutes early. So this also happens if you start early. It is our responsibility to start you on time, but it is also the player's responsibility to not start a minute early. So if you do start early, then you also get the general penalty applied to this hole if it's no more than 5 minutes early. And then exception 3, this is just based on the committee. They make this decision, but if they decide that the exceptional circumstances prevented player from starting on time. So if there's some reason why the player couldn't get to the first hole for their start time, the committee can decide that it wasn't their fault and there is no penalty, and they're able to tee off with not that general penalty on that hole.
Okay, and so that leads us into our last topic in this rule, which is stopping play. And basically what we're trying to get here is if the committee thinks that it's a dangerous situation and they stop play, players are to stop immediately. And they are to take shelter. Nothing is more important to us as a committee than to get golfers off the golf course when we have inclement weather is coming in and dangerous possible lightning or wind or whatever. So we try to make that a huge priority in our events, and we do ask that the players respect that. And so once play is stopped, everybody's off the golf course. We find shelter, and everything is closed down during a dangerous situation. You can't go on the putting green. You can't go to the driving range until the committee says you can do so. And a lot of times we will try to give you 5 or 10 minutes maybe to warm up if it's been a long delay. And then once you resume play, if you marked your golf ball, you're going to replace your golf ball back down. If you didn't mark your golf ball prior to, before you start, you can actually mark that golf ball, clean it, and put it back in play, and that starts your round. So again, it's a huge responsibility on the committee to make sure we take care of our players, and we just always ask that our players respect that. And many times we pull you off the golf course thinking it's going to rain, and it doesn't. But we try to side on the fact that we want you off the course, and side on the fact that hopefully maybe we made a mistake and we can get you back out as soon as possible.
All right, so that wraps up rule number 5. We'll be back with rule 6, playing a hole. Take our quiz.